The following weekend marked a milestone, Mila's first overnight stay at Damien's apartment. Harper had helped pack her bag, ensuring all medications and comfort items were included, reviewing emergency procedures with Damien 3 times despite knowing he had memorized them after the first explanation. "We'll be fine," he assured her, recognizing her anxiety. "I've child-proofed everything, stocked the kid Lewis with all her favorite foods, and the guest room is fully set up as her space. Dar. Lewis's number is on speed dial, along with yours." Harper nodded, trying to appear calmer than she felt. This was the longest she would be separated from Mila since her birth, a necessary step in their co-parenting arrangement, but an emotional hurdle nonetheless. "I know you'll take good care of her," she said. "It's just the first time," Damien finished gently. "I understand. You can call or video chat whenever you want. And if anything at all seems concerning, I'll bring her home immediately." His understanding eased her worry somewhat. As they prepared to leave, Mila hugged Harper tightly. "I'll be back tomorrow, Mommy," she said with the wisdom of children who sometimes parent their parents. "And I'll tell you all about Daddy's apartment and if his dinosaur books are as good as ours." Harper laughed despite herself. "I'm counting on a full report. Have fun, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too." Mila replied, already taking Damien's hand, ready for her adventure. After they left, Harper stood in the suddenly quiet apartment, the absence of Mila's energy creating a palpable void. She had planned activities to keep herself occupied, work she'd brought home, a book she'd been wanting to read, even dinner with a colleague from the initiative. But the evening stretched before her with an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. She was just considering calling to check on them when her phone chimed with a video call from Damien. On the screen appeared Mila, grinning widely, with what appeared to be Damien's apartment in the background. "Mommy. Daddy has a telescope. A real one. And we can see stars from his balcony even though it's in the city." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Harper replied, relief washing over her at the sight of Mila's excitement. "And his refrigerator makes ice cubes that are shaped like little squares, not the crescent ones like ours. And he has a whole bookshelf just for me in my room." Mila proceeded to give Harper a virtual tour of the apartment, proudly showing off the room Damien had prepared for her, painted in her favorite shade of blue, with dinosaur decals on one wall and a small desk for important judge work. The care and thought that had gone into creating a space where Mila would feel at home was evident in every detail. When Mila ran off to organize her dinosaur figures on the new shelf, Damien appeared on screen. "Just wanted you to see that we're doing fine," he said. "She's settled in well." "I can see that," Harper replied, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness in calling. "Thank you for the tour. It helps." "I thought it might," he said with understanding. "We're about to make dinosaur-shaped pasta for dinner, then maybe watch a documentary if she's not too tired. I'll have her call to say goodnight before bed." After ending the call, Harper felt her anxiety ease considerably. The apartment Damien had created for his new life in Seattle reflected the same care and consideration he had shown in every aspect of becoming Mila's father, thoughtful, child-centered, and respectful of the life she and Harper had built before he entered it. The evening passed more quickly than Harper had expected, with another call at bedtime showing a pajama-clad Mila snuggled in her new bed, clearly comfortable and secure in her father's home. When Damien brought her back the following afternoon, Mila bubbled over with stories of their time together. The stars they had observed through the telescope, the pancakes they had made for breakfast, the video call with Damien's assistant who had shown Mila pictures of the New York office, where Daddy works when he's not here. "Can I go there someday?" Mila asked. "To New York? To see Daddy's big office and the statue with the green lady?" The question created a moment of silent communication between Harper and Damien. An acknowledgement that their co-parenting would eventually need to expand beyond Seattle, that Mila's relationship with her father would naturally include experiencing his other world. "We'll plan a trip when you're on school break," Harper said, making the decision that felt right in the moment. If your doctor says it's okay to travel that far. Mila's face lit up. Really? Can we see a Broadway show? Emma at school saw The Lion King and said the animals look real. We can definitely see The Lion King, Damien promised, his expression reflecting gratitude toward Harper for her openness to the idea. And the Museum of Natural History has an amazing dinosaur exhibit. As they settled back into their routine, Harper found herself reflecting on how much had changed in the months since that chance encounter on the red-eye flight. What had begun as a shocking revelation in a courtroom had evolved into a functioning family structure. Unconventional, still finding its balance, but centered on Mila's well-being and increasingly built on mutual respect between her parents. The foundation work progressed as well. Harper's proposal for her role had been enthusiastically accepted by Damien and the board he had assembled, a diverse group of medical professionals, patient advocates, and legal experts in healthcare access. The Mila Cross Foundation, named with Harper's blessing, was already funding research grants and developing programs to support families navigating the complex medical and educational needs of children with muscular dystrophy. Working together professionally added another dimension to Harper and Damien's evolving relationship. In foundation meetings, Harper observed the leadership qualities that had made Damien successful in business, his strategic thinking, his ability to inspire others, his commitment to excellence. Now directed toward a cause deeply personal to both of them. One evening, after a particularly productive foundation board meeting, Damien suggested dinner at a small restaurant near the foundation's newly established offices. With Mila having a sleepover at a school friend's house, a milestone in itself, given her medical needs, Harper accepted. The restaurant was quiet and unpretentious, a neighborhood place rather than the high-end establishments Damien could easily afford. As they settled at a corner table, Harper realized this was the first time they had been alone together in a social setting since reconnecting. Their interactions had always centered on Mila or foundation business, carefully maintaining the boundaries of co-parenting and professional collaboration. The board was impressed with your presentation today, Damien said as they studied the menus. The outreach program for rural communities is exactly what we need to expand our impact. It's something the initiative has been working on in other contexts, Harper replied. Adapting it for muscular dystrophy families was a natural extension. Their conversation flowed easily from foundation matters to Mila's progress in school and physical therapy, to the upcoming trip to New York they were planning for her spring break. The comfortable rhythm reminded Harper of their early relationship. The intellectual connection, the shared values, the ability to move between serious topics and lighter moments without effort. Do you ever think about how strange this all is? Harper asked as they waited for dessert. 6 months ago, you didn't know Mila existed. Now you're her father, we're running a foundation together, and somehow, it works. Damien's expression grew thoughtful. I think about it every day, he admitted. How different my life would have been if I'd made different choices 6 years ago. If I'd trusted you with the truth instead of trying to protect you in the worst possible way. We can't change the past, Harper said, a statement she had come to truly believe. And despite everything, I can't regret the life I've built with Mila. She's had a good childhood, even with the health challenges. Because of you, Damien said with quiet certainty. Your strength, your love, your unwavering commitment to her. I see it every day, Harper. The mother you are, it's extraordinary. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Thank you for saying that. And for being the father she deserves now that you're here. She adores you, you know. The feeling is mutual, Damien replied, his expression softening as it always did when discussing their daughter. She's the best of both of us. Your compassion and determination. My analytical mind. Your sense of justice. My strategic thinking. And both our stubbornness, Harper added with a smile. Definitely that, Damien agreed, laughing. Then his expression grew more serious. Harper, there's something I've wanted to ask you. Something not about Mila or the foundation. The shift in his tone alerted her to the significance of whatever was coming. What is it? Would you consider having dinner with me again? Not to discuss co-parenting or foundation business. Just, us. Getting to know each other again as the people we are now. The question hung between them, simple in its phrasing but complex in its implications. This wasn't about their shared responsibilities or their daughter's needs. This was about the connection that had been gradually rebuilding between them as adults, as individuals with a complicated history and a potentially shared future. Harper studied him across the table, seeing both the man she had loved years ago and the person he had become. More grounded, more authentic, more aware of what truly mattered. The anger and hurt that had defined her feelings toward him for so long had gradually transformed into something else, respect, understanding, and perhaps something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. I think I'd like that, she said finally, her voice soft but certain. To see who we are now, beyond being Mila's parents. Relief and joy flickered across Damien's face. Thank you, he said simply. For being willing to consider it. I'm not making any promises, Harper cautioned. There's a lot of history between us, Damien. A lot of hurt that doesn't just disappear because we're co-parenting well. I understand, he assured her. No expectations. No pressure. Just two people sharing a meal and a conversation. As they left the restaurant, walking together toward the parking lot where their separate cars waited, Harper felt a sense of stepping into uncharted territory. The boundaries that had kept their interactions safely defined were shifting, opening possibilities neither had anticipated when fate put them in adjacent seats on that red-eye flight. Their Just Us dinner took place the following week at a small waterfront restaurant known more for its spectacular view of Puget Sound than its exclusivity. Damien had chosen the venue carefully. Special enough to indicate the significance of the evening, but not so formal that it would create pressure or discomfort. Harper arrived to find him already seated at a window table, gazing out at the water. He stood as she approached, his appreciation evident as he took in her appearance, a simple blue dress she had chosen after more deliberation than she cared to admit, even to herself. You look beautiful, he said as she sat across from him. Thank you, she replied, feeling a flutter of nervousness she hadn't experienced in years. This is a lovely spot. I remembered how much you always loved being near water, Damien said. You used to say it helped you think more clearly. The fact that he had remembered this detail from their past touched Harper unexpectedly. I still feel that way. Mila and I come to the waterfront parks whenever we need to reset. Their conversation began cautiously, both navigating the unfamiliar territory of relating to each other as something other than co-parents or professional colleagues. They spoke of their lives during the 6 years of separation, Harper's journey through single motherhood and building her legal career while managing Mila's health needs, Damien's rise to CEO of Cross Global and his gradual disillusionment with the values his father had instilled in him. I was successful by every conventional measure, Damien reflected. The company expanded globally under my leadership. Our stock value tripled. We acquired competitors and diversified into new markets. He shook his head slightly. And none of it filled the emptiness I felt after walking away from you. Harper met his gaze across the table. Why didn't you try to find me? Even years later, when you were established in your role, less vulnerable to your father's manipulation? I convinced myself you were better off without me, Damien admitted. That my presence in your life would only bring complications and potential harm. And as time passed, it became easier to believe you had moved on, built a new life, found someone who deserved you more than I did. There wasn't anyone else, Harper said quietly. Not seriously. Between Mila and work and managing her health needs, relationships weren't a priority. And now? Damien asked, the question gentle but direct. Harper considered her answer carefully. Now I'm open to possibilities I wasn't before. Mila is older, her condition is stable with the new treatments, and I have perspective I didn't have when she was younger. Perspective on what matters, Damien suggested. On what's worth risking for? Yes, Harper agreed. Exactly that. As dinner progressed, the initial awkwardness faded, replaced by a comfortable rhythm reminiscent of their early relationship but deepened by the maturity and life experience they had each gained. They discovered shared interests that had developed during their years apart, a love for historical documentaries, an appreciation for classical music, a commitment to environmental conservation. Do you remember that seminar where we first met? Damien asked as they shared dessert. Constitutional theory with Professor Harrington. Harper smiled at the memory. How could I forget? You kept taking the seat next to mine, even though there were plenty of other options. The aisle seat, Damien recalled. You always chose the aisle seat in every class. I noticed that from the first day. It made me feel less trapped, Harper admitted. Growing up in foster care, I developed a need for clear exit routes. The aisle seat gave me that security. Damien nodded, understanding. And I kept choosing the seat beside yours because I was fascinated by the brilliant woman who challenged every assumption the professor made, who saw legal theory not just as academic exercise but as a framework that affected real people's lives. I thought you were trying to copy my notes, Harper confessed with a small laugh. Until you started leaving coffee on my desk before class. Always black, no sugar. The way you still drink it, Damien observed, nodding toward her cup. Some things don't change, Harper acknowledged. Then, more softly, and some things do. The evening ended with a walk along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the dark surface of the Sound. They moved side by side, close but not touching, the space between them charged with awareness and possibility. At Harper's car, Damien paused. Thank you for tonight, he said simply. For giving us a chance to remember who we were and discover who we are now. I enjoyed it, Harper replied honestly. More than I expected to. Enough to consider doing it again? Damien asked, hope evident in his voice. Harper studied him in the soft glow of the street lights, seeing both the familiar and the new in his features, the same intense gaze that had first captured her attention in that graduate seminar, now tempered with wisdom earned through mistakes and growth. Yes, she said. I'd like that. The moment called for more, perhaps a touch, a gesture to acknowledge the connection rebuilding between them. But both recognized the value of patience, of allowing this fragile new beginning to develop at its own pace. Good night, Harper, Damien said softly. Good night, Damien. As Harper drove home, she found herself reflecting on the evening with a sense of cautious optimism. The man she had spent time with tonight was not the same one who had walked away 6 years ago, just as she was not the same woman he had left behind. They had both been shaped by their experiences, by their separate journeys, and now by their shared commitment to Mila. Whether those changes were enough to build something new from the ashes of what had been lost remained to be seen. But for the first time since that fateful red-eye flight, Harper allowed herself to truly consider the possibility. The following weeks brought a gradual evolution in their relationship. Additional dinners that had nothing to do with co-parenting or foundation business, conversations that extended beyond Mila's needs to their own hopes and interests, moments of connection that reminded them of what had drawn them together in the first place while acknowledging how far they had each come since then. They maintained appropriate boundaries around Mila, careful not to confuse her with premature suggestions of a family reunification. But their daughter, perceptive as always, noticed the shift in their dynamic. You and Daddy don't look sad when you talk anymore, she observed one evening as Harper helped her with homework. You laugh at his jokes now. Even the not very funny ones. Harper smiled despite herself. Daddy and I are becoming better friends, she explained carefully. Which is good for you, because it means we can all do more things together without it feeling uncomfortable. Mila considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Like our trip to New York next week? Exactly like that, Harper agreed. The planned trip to New York, Mila's first time visiting the city where her father maintained his primary residence, had evolved from a simple visit to a significant family experience. Damien had arranged a balanced itinerary that included child-friendly activities like the promised Broadway show and dinosaur exhibits, while also introducing Mila to aspects of his life there: his penthouse apartment with its spectacular view of Central Park, his office at Cross Global headquarters, and carefully selected colleagues who had been part of his professional world for years. What he had not included, despite tradition and expectation, was a meeting with his father. Richard Cross had made his disapproval of the situation clear from the beginning, questioning the paternity despite DNA evidence, suggesting financial settlements to handle the situation discreetly, and ultimately threatening to contest Damien's leadership position when his son refused to follow the elder Cross's preferred approach. The night before their departure for New York, after Mila was asleep, Damien raised the subject during a quiet conversation with Harper in her living room. "My father has learned about our visit," he said, his expression troubled. "He's demanding to meet Mila while we're there." Harper tensed immediately. "Absolutely not. Not after everything you've told me about his reaction, his suggestions about handling the situation. He doesn't get access to her." "I agree completely," Damien assured her. "I've already declined his demand. But I wanted you to know because he's not likely to accept that answer. He may try to insert himself into our visit somehow. How would he even know where we'll be?" Harper asked, concerned. Damien sighed. "He still has connections throughout the company, people loyal to him who report back. And New York society circles are small. If we're seen at certain restaurants or events, word will travel. Then we avoid those places," Harper said firmly. "Mila's first experience of New York should be joyful and positive. I won't have it tainted by a confrontation with a man who sees her as an inconvenience to his dynasty." "I've taken precautions," Damien assured her. "Changed reservations, adjusted our schedule, informed security at my apartment and office. But I wanted you to be aware of the situation." Harper studied him, noting the tension in his jaw, the subtle signs of stress that had become familiar to her over their months of co-parenting. "This is difficult for you," she observed. "Standing against your father so directly." "Not as difficult as you might think," Damien replied. 6 years ago, his disapproval was devastating to me. I believed I needed his approval, his acceptance, to be successful. Now. He shook his head. "Now I understand what actually matters. And it isn't his version of the Cross legacy." The certainty in his voice reassured Harper more than any specific security measures could have. This was the fundamental change in Damien that had gradually earned her trust, his willingness to prioritize Mila's well-being and Harper's peace of mind over family expectations or corporate politics. "Thank you," she said simply. "For protecting her. For putting her first." "Always," Damien promised. "No matter what." The trip to New York began smoothly, with Mila delighting in her first airplane journey where she was old enough to fully appreciate the experience. Damien had arranged for a private car to meet them at the airport, complete with a booster seat for Mila and her favorite snacks stocked in the console. "Is this where you live, Daddy?" Mila asked as they drove through Manhattan, her face pressed to the window, taking in the towering buildings and bustling streets. "Part of the time," Damien explained. "But I like Seattle better now, because that's where you and Mommy are." His apartment, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, impressed even Harper, who had been prepared for luxury but not for the thoughtful touches that made the space feel personal rather than merely expensive. Like his Seattle apartment, Damien had prepared a room specifically for Mila, decorated with the same care and attention to her interests. "Look, Mommy!" Mila exclaimed, discovering a telescope similar to the one in his Seattle home positioned by the window. "We can see stars from here too." "And the dinosaur exhibits at the Natural History Museum," Damien added, pointing out the distinctive building visible from their vantage point. "That's where we're going tomorrow." Their first 2 days in New York unfolded according to plan. The museum visit where Mila's knowledge of dinosaurs impressed even the tour guide, the promised Broadway performance of The Lion King that left her wide-eyed with wonder, meals at child-friendly restaurants that nonetheless offered sophisticated options for the adults. Throughout, Damien proved to be an attentive host and guide, balancing Mila's interests with experiences that would give her a sense of the city he had called home for so long. On the third day, they visited Cross Global Headquarters, a sleek skyscraper in Midtown where Damien maintained his primary office. He had arranged a brief, carefully structured tour, introducing Mila to key team members who greeted her with genuine warmth and interest. "This is where Daddy works when he's not in Seattle," Damien explained as they entered his corner office with its panoramic view of the city. "But I'm spending more and more time at our Seattle offices now." "It's very high up," Mila observed, looking out the windows with fascination. "You can see everything from here." "That's why I like it," Damien replied. "It helps me think about the big picture." As they prepared to leave for lunch at a nearby restaurant, Damien's assistant appeared at the door, her expression tense. "Mr. Cross, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your father is in the building. He's on his way up now." Damien's expression hardened. "Thank you, Jessica. Please have security ready to escort him out if necessary." He turned to Harper, who had instinctively moved closer to Mila. "I'm sorry about this. We can leave through the private elevator if you prefer." Before Harper could respond, the office door opened again, and Richard Cross entered without knocking, a tall, imposing figure in his 70s, impeccably dressed, his silver hair and commanding presence creating an immediate impact. His gaze swept the room, briefly acknowledging Damien before fixing on Mila with an assessing look that made Harper's protective instincts flare. "So this is the child," he said, his tone neutral but somehow dismissive. "I see you've brought her to the company headquarters. Bold move, considering the circumstances." "Father," Damien said, his voice controlled but cold. "This is a private family visit. You weren't invited." Richard Cross raised an eyebrow. "Family is precisely why I'm here. If this child is indeed a Cross, as you insist despite the irregular circumstances, then I have a right to meet my purported granddaughter." Harper stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Mila. "Mr. Cross, I'm Harper Lane, Mila's mother. And I need to be clear, you have no rights regarding my daughter. Your presence here is unwelcome and inappropriate." The elder Cross studied Harper with the same assessing gaze he had directed at Mila. "Ms. Lane, I've heard a great deal about you. The legal researcher who somehow captured my son's attention during his graduate studies. And now, conveniently, the mother of his previously unknown child." "There's nothing convenient about it," Harper replied evenly. "And Mila's paternity has been legally established beyond any question. Your insinuations are both incorrect and offensive." Richard turned his attention back to Damien. "This situation could have been handled discreetly, as I advised. Instead, you've brought them here, to company headquarters, flaunting a relationship that raises questions about judgment and stability at a time when the board is considering succession planning." "The board is well aware of my family's situation," Damien replied. "As is the press, our major shareholders, and anyone else who might have an interest. There's nothing to hide, Father. Mila is my daughter. Harper is her mother. And neither of them deserves your disrespect." Throughout this exchange, Mila had remained unusually quiet, observing the tension with the perceptiveness that often surprised adults in her life. Now she stepped forward, looking up at Richard Cross with curious but wary eyes. "Are you my grandfather?" she asked directly. Richard seemed momentarily taken aback by the child's forthright question. He looked down at her, perhaps truly seeing her for the first time. The unmistakable Cross features in her face, the intelligent eyes that assessed him with surprising maturity. "Biologically speaking, it appears so," he replied after a moment. "You don't seem very happy about it," Mila observed with the brutal honesty of children. A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps reluctant respect, crossed Richard's face. Happiness isn't the relevant metric in family business matters, young lady. Mila, she corrected. My name is Mila Lane. And family isn't business. That's what Daddy says. Damien placed a protective hand on Mila's shoulder, pride evident in his expression despite the tension of the moment. Father, we have plans for lunch. This conversation is over. I'll contact you later to discuss appropriate boundaries moving forward. Richard's expression hardened. This isn't finished, Damien. The board meeting next week. We'll proceed as scheduled, Damien interrupted. And my family situation will remain exactly what it is, a personal matter that has no bearing on my leadership of the company. He turned to Harper and Mila. Shall we go? I believe we have a reservation at that restaurant with the special desserts we talked about. Mila nodded eagerly, already distracted by the promise of treats. Harper took her hand, moving toward the door with Damien close behind them, presenting a united front that effectively dismissed Richard Cross without another word. As they entered the private elevator that would take them directly to the building's lobby, Harper could feel the tension radiating from Damien despite his outward composure. I'm sorry about that, he said once the doors closed, shielding them from his father's presence. He had no right to ambush us like that. Are you okay, Daddy? Mila asked, picking up on his distress with her characteristic sensitivity. Damien knelt to her level, his expression softening. I'm fine, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, and that can make conversations uncomfortable. But it has nothing to do with you, and you handled it perfectly. He didn't seem very nice, Mila observed. Not like Mommy's friends or your friends in Seattle. My father has different priorities, Damien explained carefully. He cares very much about the company and its reputation, sometimes more than about people's feelings. Harper watched this interaction with a mixture of concern and admiration. Concern for the impact of Richard's coldness on both Mila and Damien, admiration for how Damien was handling the situation with honesty appropriate to Mila's age and understanding. The elevator reached the lobby, and Damien straightened, his public composure returning. Now, about those special desserts I mentioned. The remainder of their day proceeded as planned, with Damien making a visible effort to ensure Richard's unwelcome appearance didn't overshadow their experiences. Mila, resilient as always, quickly returned to her excited exploration of the city, her grandfather's coldness apparently making little lasting impression compared to the wonders of New York. That evening, after Mila was asleep in her room at Damien's apartment, Harper found him on the terrace, gazing out at the city lights with a tumbler of whiskey in hand, a rare indulgence she had seldom seen him take. She's asleep, Harper said, joining him at the railing. Today's adventures wore her out. Damien nodded, his profile illuminated by the city's glow. She's remarkable, Harper. The way she handled my father, direct, honest, but not intimidated. That comes from you. She has your confidence, Harper countered. And your ability to assess people quickly. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the city spread before them like a constellation of earthbound stars. The board meeting he mentioned, Harper said finally. Is that going to be a problem? Damien sighed, taking a small sip of his whiskey. He's trying to leverage traditional board members, the old guard who share his views on family legacy and corporate image. But he's overestimating his influence. I've spent the past 6 years building my own relationships with the board, demonstrating my vision for the company's future. Most of them support me, not him. And if they didn't? Harper asked, the question that had been lingering since Richard's appearance. If it came down to a choice between the company and us? Damien turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the dim light. There is no choice, Harper. Not anymore. If the board forced that ultimatum, which they won't, I would walk away from Cross Global without hesitation. The certainty in his voice was absolute, without a trace of the conflict that might have been there years ago. This was the man who had emerged from the crucible of their separation, from the shock of discovering his daughter, from months of rebuilding trust and understanding what truly mattered. "You've changed," Harper said softly. "For the better, I hope," Damien replied. "Definitely for the better." She moved closer, the distance between them narrowing both physically and emotionally. "The man I knew 6 years ago would never have stood up to your father that way. Would never have put family above the company. The man you knew 6 years ago was still trying to earn his father's approval," Damien acknowledged. "Still believed that legacy was measured in stock prices and acquisitions rather than in the lives we touch and the people we love." The word love hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither had directly addressed despite the growing closeness of recent months. "And now?" Harper asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien set his glass on the nearby table, turning to face her fully. "Now I understand what I couldn't then. That no success is worth sacrificing the people who matter most. That courage isn't about facing business rivals or market challenges. It's about being vulnerable with the people you care about, even when it's terrifying." He took a deep breath, as if gathering that very courage. "I love you, Harper. I never stopped, even when I convinced myself that leaving was the right thing to do. And I love our daughter, this miraculous person we created who somehow found her way back to me despite my mistakes." Harper felt her heart racing, emotions she had carefully contained for so long finally breaking through the barriers of caution and self-protection. "I was so angry with you," she admitted. "For so many years. I thought I hated you for leaving, for making that decision without me." "You had every right to hate me," Damien said quietly. "But I didn't." "Not really." Harper's voice softened. "Under the anger was hurt. And under the hurt was the truth I didn't want to face. That despite everything, some part of me never stopped loving you either." The admission hung between them, both a resolution of their past and an opening to their future. Damien reached for her hand, his touch gentle, questioning. "Where does that leave us now?" he asked. Harper looked up at him, seeing both the man she had loved years ago and the person he had become, stronger, wiser, more authentic. "In a place where we can choose differently than we did before. Where we can be honest about what we want and what we fear. Where we can build something new, not just for Mila's sake, but for our own." Damien's other hand came up to touch her cheek, the gesture tender and reverent. "May I kiss you, Harper?" The formal request, so respectful of her boundaries, so different from the entitled assumption that might have characterized him years ago, touched her deeply. "Yes," she whispered. Their lips met in a kiss that bridged 6 years of separation, healing old wounds even as it awakened new possibilities. It was both familiar and entirely new, the physical memory of what had been, transformed by who they had each become in the intervening years. When they finally parted, Damien rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I never thought I'd get a second chance," he murmured. "Not after what I did." "Life rarely gives us what we expect," Harper replied, thinking of the red-eye flight that had changed everything. "Sometimes it gives us what we need instead." The remainder of their New York visit took on a new dimension, still focused on Mila and her experiences, but now with an undercurrent of rediscovered connection between her parents. They maintained appropriate boundaries around their daughter, careful not to confuse her with sudden displays of affection, but the shift in their dynamic was evident in small ways, shared glances, casual touches, a new ease in their interactions that Mila, perceptive as always, certainly noticed but didn't comment on. Richard Cross made no further appearances, though Damien received several terse messages demanding meetings that he politely but firmly declined until after his family's visit concluded. The threatened board confrontation remained a concern for the future, but not one that cast a shadow over their remaining time in New York. On their final evening in the city, after a day that included a boat ride around Manhattan and a visit to the Central Park Zoo, they returned to Damien's apartment for a quiet dinner. Mila, exhausted from the day's adventures but fighting sleep, curled up on the couch between her parents as they looked through photos from their trip. "I like New York," she declared through a yawn. "But I like Seattle better." "Why is that?" Damien asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. Because in Seattle, we're all together more, Mila explained with the simple logic of childhood. You, me, and mommy. Here you have to go to your big office sometimes, and it's just me and mommy. Harper and Damien exchanged glances over their daughter's head, both recognizing the truth in her observation. Their co-parenting arrangement, while functional, still involved separate households, separate lives connected primarily through Mila. Would you like us to be together more often? Harper asked carefully, aware they were entering territory they had deliberately avoided discussing directly with Mila. Yes, Mila said without hesitation. Like a regular family. Jamie at school has 2 houses because her parents got divorced, but they never do things all together. We do things together all the time, but we still have different houses. It's confusing. Out of the mouths of babes, Harper thought, meeting Damien's gaze again. The question Mila was raising, without fully understanding its implications, was one they would need to address eventually: what form their reconnection would take, how it would shape their family structure, what it would mean for their separate lives that had begun to intertwine in ways neither had anticipated when fate put them in adjacent seats on that red-eye flight. Sometimes grown-up relationships are complicated, Damien explained gently. But what never changes is how much we both love you. And how we'll always be your parents, together or apart, Harper added. Mila seemed to accept this, her eyelids growing heavier as sleep finally began to claim her. I think you should be together, she murmured as she drifted off. You both smile more when you're together. After carrying Mila to her bed and tucking her in, Harper and Damien returned to the living room, the weight of their daughter's observation hanging between them. Out of the mouths of babes, Damien said, echoing Harper's earlier thought. She sees more than we give her credit for, Harper agreed, settling on the couch where Mila had been. The question is, what do we do with that observation? Damien sat beside her, close but not crowding. What do you want to do with it? The directness of the question was characteristic of the man he had become: no games, no assumptions, just honest communication even when the topics were difficult. I want to be careful, Harper said after a moment. For Mila's sake. She's already had so many changes in her life this past year, meeting you, adjusting to co-parenting, her medical treatments, the foundation work. Adding another major shift in her family structure. Could be confusing, Damien finished. I understand that concern. And I share it. But? Harper prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification in his tone. But I also think children are remarkably adaptable when changes come from a place of love and stability, Damien said. Mila has handled everything thrown at her with extraordinary resilience. And she's clearly picking up on what's happening between us, even though we've tried to be discreet. Harper nodded, acknowledging the truth in his assessment. So what are you suggesting? Not a rushed decision, Damien assured her. But perhaps a conversation about where we see this going. About what we both want for our future, individually and together. And what do you want, Damien? Harper asked, turning to face him fully. His expression was open, vulnerable in a way the younger Damien would never have allowed himself to be. I want a life with you and Mila. Not just as co-parents, but as partners, as a family in every sense. I want to wake up beside you in the morning and fall asleep next to you at night. I want to build something that heals the wounds of the past rather than being defined by them. The honesty of his answer touched Harper deeply. This wasn't a calculated proposal or a business arrangement. This was Damien offering his heart, fully and without reservation. I want that too, she admitted softly. But I'm scared, Damien. Scared of trusting completely again. Scared of what happens if it doesn't work. Scared of what it would do to Mila if we tried and failed. Those are valid fears, Damien acknowledged. And I can't promise we won't face challenges. But I can promise that I'm not the same man who left you 6 years ago. I can promise that I will never again make decisions that affect your life without including you in them. I can promise that whatever happens, Mila's well-being will always come first for both of us." Harper reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Maybe we start slowly," she suggested. "More time together as a family. More openness with Mila about our relationship while being clear that we're still figuring things out. See how she responds, how we all adjust." "I'd like that," Damien agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "No pressure, no timeline. Just us finding our way together." As they sat in the quiet of his New York apartment, the city lights creating a backdrop of twinkling stars beyond the windows, Harper felt a sense of possibility she hadn't allowed herself to fully embrace until now. The path forward wasn't clear or certain, but it was illuminated by something stronger than the anger and hurt that had defined their past. By love, by growth, by the shared commitment to the daughter who had brought them back together against all odds. The journey that had begun with an aisle seat on a red-eye flight and continued through a courtroom revelation was entering a new phase, one they would navigate not as adversaries or even just co-parents, but as partners finding their way back to each other, changed by time and circumstance but connected by something that had never truly been broken. In the morning, they would return to Seattle, to the life they had been building there, to the foundation work that gave purpose to their shared experience, to the daughter who had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. And they would take the next steps together, one day at a time, writing a new chapter in a story that had taken an unexpected turn but might yet find its way to the ending they had once believed impossible. As Harper leaned against Damien's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her, she thought of Mila's simple observation, "You both smile more when you're together." Perhaps, in the end, that was the truest measure of where their path should lead, not legal documents or court testimonies, but the simple joy they found in each other's presence, a joy their daughter had recognized even before they fully acknowledged it themselves. The aisle seat that had once represented Harper's need for escape routes, for control in an uncertain world, had become the starting point of a journey back to the very thing she had been protecting herself from: vulnerability, connection, love. And Damien, who had once taken the stand to acknowledge a daughter he hadn't known existed, now stood beside her by choice, committed to building a future that honored their past while creating something new and stronger from its foundations. Together, they would face whatever came next: Richard's board machinations, Mila's evolving medical needs, the challenges of blending their separate lives. But they would face it as they sat now, side by side, hands intertwined, hearts aligned in purpose and in love. If this story moved you, share with someone who believes in second chances. That's how love multiplies. Subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you, broken things can still bloom. Leave a comment with one lesson you've taken from the story. Your reflection might inspire our next episode.